The faint aroma of stale coffee hung in the air of my small Richmond apartment, a comforting, familiar scent that usually signaled a quiet morning. My fingers, calloused from years of kneading dough and arranging canapes, now simply tapped against the cool metal of my laptop. I was 42, my name was Imani Hayes, and I lived a life that was, by most standards, unremarkable. But beneath the surface of my calm existence, there was a quiet reservoir of resentment, a deep, unyielding current fueled by a betrayal that had reshaped my entire world. I was jaded, yes, deeply so, but also meticulously observant and, above all, strategically patient. These traits, forged in the crucible of past failures, were about to become my greatest strengths. Years ago, my world had been vibrant, alive with the sizzle of garlic and the sweet scent of baking vanilla. Imani's Flavour, my small catering venture, had been more than just a business. It had been the embodiment of my passion, the culmination of countless hours spent perfecting recipes, dreaming up new menus, and building a reputation one delicious bite at a time. I'd poured every ounce of my savings, every drop of my energy, and every fiber of my being into that dream. I remembered the worn wooden cutting board that had been my grandmother's, the clatter of pots and pans, the early morning trips to the farmer's market, the sheer joy of seeing faces light up at the taste of my food. It wasn't just a job, it was my heart laid bare on a platter. Then came Seraphina Vance. She swept into my life like a perfectly coiffed tornado, all charm and grand promises. She ran an event management company, or so she claimed, and she saw potential in my burgeoning catering business. She spoke of exclusive contracts, lavish events, and a partnership that would elevate Imani's Flavour from a local gem to a regional powerhouse. I was cautious at first, my inherent skepticism warring with the dazzling prospect she painted. But she was persuasive, her words like sponge sugar, sweet and seemingly substantial. She showed me glossy brochures, impressive financial projections, and even introduced me to a few seemingly satisfied clients who sang her praises. My meticulous nature, usually a shield, was momentarily dulled by the allure of expansion, of finally seeing my culinary artistry reach a wider audience. I wanted to believe. I truly wanted to believe. She asked for an initial investment, a substantial sum to secure our partnership, to lock in the exclusive contracts she was negotiating. She framed it as a necessary step, a sign of my commitment, a demonstration of my belief in our shared future. I hesitated, then reasoned with myself. This was it, I thought. This was the big break. I took out a loan, drew from my emergency savings, and liquidated a small retirement fund I had barely started. The day I transferred the money, a heavy knot formed in my stomach, a premonition I dismissed as mere nerves. The contracts never materialized. The lavish events became vague promises. Seraphina became elusive, her calls less frequent, her excuses more elaborate. The sickening realization dawned on me slowly, painfully, like a spreading bruise. I had been swindled. My investment was gone, vanished into the ether of Seraphina Vance's perfectly manicured hands. The catering business without the promised contracts and with its capital drained, withered, and died. I tried to salvage it, to fight back, to demand my money. But Seraphina was a ghost, her company a shell, her promises empty air. The legal avenues I explored led nowhere, tangled in a web of shell corporations and untraceable transactions. The dreams I had nurtured for years crumbled into dust. The smells of my kitchen, once comforting, became a painful reminder of what I had lost. The silence of the empty space where my ovens once roared was deafening. That's when the jadedness truly set in. I stopped trusting easily, my empathy curdled into a hardened cynicism. But beneath the jadedness, a different kind of resolve began to form. I started collecting, not evidence for immediate legal action, for I knew that battle was lost. No, I collected everything I could find. Screenshots of her old websites, archived social media posts, public records, snippets of articles mentioning her name, even whispers and rumors I heard through the grapevine about her other ventures and the disgruntled people she left in her wake. It was a quiet, obsessive pursuit, driven by a deep-seated belief that people like Seraphina Vance rarely change their stripes. They just find new hunting grounds. I knew with an almost religious certainty that she would resurface, and when she did, I would be ready. I was strategically patient, nursing my wounds, but also sharpening my tools. I would wait for the opportune moment to expose her, to make sure no one else suffered the same fate I had. I would clean up her mess, not for profit, but for principle. That's how I found myself, years later, scrolling through an anonymous forum dedicated to consumer complaints and stumbled upon a post that made my blood run cold, then boil with a grim satisfaction. The title: "She charged me $1,200 in cleaning fees." So I cleaned her reviews, leaped out at me. My heart hammered, not from surprise, but from a chilling recognition. The details unfolded like a familiar nightmare. An event space, seemingly reputable online, a polite host, then the outrageous, unsubstantiated cleaning fees. Blurry photos of random trash, claims of unusable premises, and a booking platform that sided with the host. The Reddit user Liam described the scam with a raw frustration that resonated deep within my soul. She was clearly running a side hustle, scam a few hundred off each booking and hope no one fights too hard, Liam had written. My fingers clenched around the mouse. A side hustle? This wasn't a side hustle. This was Seraphina's entire modus operandi, just repackaged. The specific details, the audacity, the way she manipulated the system, it was unmistakably her. Seraphina Vance, still preying on innocent people, still weaving her web of deceit. My jadedness, usually a heavy blanket, felt like a fuel now, igniting a cold, precise fire. This was it. This was the moment I had been patiently waiting for. This was the spark that would finally allow me to use the meticulously gathered evidence I had hoarded for so long. The universe, it seemed, had finally brought Seraphina within striking distance, and this time she wouldn't just leave me with ashes. She would find that the ashes had been carefully collected and were about to be thrown back into her perfectly made-up face. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. My mind raced, not with anger, but with a calculated calm. The game was on. Liam's Reddit post was a spark, but sparks need oxygen to become a flame. My jadedness, which had kept me isolated for so long, now allowed me to approach this situation with a chilling detachment, free from the emotional turbulence that had clouded my judgment years ago. I wouldn't be confronting Seraphina directly, not yet. My role, as I had envisioned it for years, was to be the anonymous informant, the quiet amplifier. I would arm the current victims with knowledge, validate their experiences, and guide them in their fight, ensuring they didn't fall into the same traps I had. My meticulously collected evidence, years in the making, wasn't just for my vindication. It was a weapon to be wielded by many hands. I started by delving deeper into Liam's story. I didn't just read the post, I analyzed it. I searched for the specific event space mentioned, cross-referenced it with local business listings in Richmond, Virginia, and quickly found the owner's name. Seraphina Vance. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. She had rebranded, of course. The name of her event space was innocuous, something about elegant gatherings. Her online presence was polished, professional, almost gleaming, the kind of surface shine that belied the rot beneath. Her previous ventures, the ones that had ensnared me, had also worn such a facade. It was her signature. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a practice dance. I navigated through the labyrinthine folders on my encrypted hard drive, pulling up files I hadn't looked at in years. Old email exchanges, blurred screenshots of financial statements, a handful of unverified but consistent complaints about her from other small business owners in the catering and event planning industries that I'd quietly cataloged. There was a faint scent of lemon polish from the screen, a clean, almost sterile smell that felt entirely at odds with the murky, dishonest world I was re-entering. My desk lamp cast a pool of cool light, illuminating the methodical way I worked. Each piece of information was like a puzzle piece, and I had been collecting them for a very long time. My initial approach to Liam was cautious, anonymous, and subtle. I created a burner email address, untraceable and distinct from anything I normally used. My first message was brief, almost cryptic. I read your Reddit post about elegant gatherings. I've had similar experiences with the owner. You're not alone, don't stop fighting. I knew the first rule of online anonymity: don't overshare. Give just enough to pique curiosity, to establish credibility without revealing too much. I attached a single, grainy screenshot I had found years ago, an obscure online forum post from 2018 detailing an almost identical scam by a Seraphina V. It was just enough to show Liam that this was a pattern, not an isolated incident. My patience was being tested, but I knew haste would ruin everything. Liam's reply came within hours, filled with a mixture of surprise and desperation. "Who is this? How do you know?" His words pulsed with a raw need for validation. This was my opening, I responded, carefully constructing each sentence, choosing my words like a meticulous chef selecting ingredients. I shared general advice: focus on facts, document everything, request itemized bills, take photos before and after a rental, don't trust promises, get everything in writing. I didn't reveal my personal history, not yet. My jadedness reminded me that trust, even online, was a luxury I couldn't afford to squander. I was the ghost in the machine, guiding from the shadows. Liam, following my initial suggestions, tried to reappeal his case with the booking platform, armed with more specific requests for proof and a detailed timeline of his interaction with Seraphina. He even sent her a formal letter, citing specific clauses from their rental agreement. The platform, predictable in its corporate apathy, denied him again. Seraphina, emboldened, sent a vaguely threatening email implying legal action for defamation if he continued to press the issue. This was classic Seraphina. Bully and bluster, then retreat. It mirrored her past behavior perfectly. Liam's frustration escalated, and through our anonymous exchanges, I could feel his despair growing. He was reaching a breaking point, just as I had years ago. This fueled my resolve. "They won't help you," I typed, my fingers steady. "They have no incentive to. Their business model relies on maintaining a facade of seamless transactions, not on protecting individual renters. You need to hit where it hurts her most: her reputation, her ability to attract new victims. You need to find others. There are others." I subtly hinted at online communities, consumer protection sites, anywhere that people shared experiences, good or bad, about local businesses. I even mentioned offhand the importance of using specific keywords in reviews to make them more searchable. My role as an amplifier began to expand. I started anonymously searching for other complaints about elegant gatherings or Seraphina Vance across various platforms: Yelp, Google reviews, Facebook event groups, even local community forums. I found a few scattered one-star reviews, vague and easily dismissed, usually buried under a mountain of glowing, suspiciously similar five-star reviews. These were no doubt the ones Seraphina paid for or coerced from compliant friends. My meticulous eye for detail noticed the patterns, the same phrasing, the identical stock photos, the sudden influx after a period of no activity. It was a common tactic, but one I could easily dissect. I started reaching out to these other disgruntled reviewers again using carefully crafted anonymous messages. I saw your review about elegant gatherings. I'm researching similar issues. Would you be willing to share more details off the record? Your experience could help others. Some ignored me, some were wary, but a few, weary from their own battles, responded with cautious hope. There was a young couple who had their wedding rehearsal dinner ruined by a last-minute price hike and a hidden restocking fee. A small business owner who had been promised a corporate retreat space and found it double booked. Each story was a slightly different iteration of the same core scam, each one a fresh wound. The narratives they shared, the echoes of my own past, sent a familiar ache through me. The feeling of being dismissed, unheard, powerless against a system designed to protect the powerful. It was a subtle psychological toll, reopening old scars. The memories of my catering business, the bustling kitchen, the vibrant colors of fresh produce, the aroma of a perfectly roasted chicken, they flooded my mind, poignant and painful. My jadedness tried to push them away, to remind me that dwelling on the past was fruitless. But the truth was that pain was precisely what fueled my resolve. It reminded me why I was doing this. It wasn't just about Seraphina's present victims. It was about the ghost of Imani's Flavour haunting the edges of my quiet life. As I compiled these new testimonies, cross-referencing them with my years of collected evidence, Seraphina's true pattern became horrifyingly clear. She would lure clients with competitive prices, then spring exorbitant fabricated fees after the event, knowing most people wouldn't have the time, energy, or resources to fight a well-funded business. And she was clever. She would target events that were emotionally significant, weddings, anniversaries, corporate launches, knowing that people would be less likely to publicly complain and tarnish the memory of their special day. She relied on their silence, their shame, their resignation, but she hadn't counted on a strategically patient ghost from her past. The escalation began. Guided by my anonymous advice, Liam and a few other newly emboldened victims started posting their detailed, factual reviews on multiple platforms, armed with specific dates, screenshots of their clean spaces, and the fraudulent invoices. I provided them with a template of information to include specific dates, names of staff even if fake, and the exact wording of the scam. I explained why these details mattered, why clear, concise language was more impactful than emotional outbursts. It wasn't about ranting, it was about dismantling. My meticulous nature had found its new outlet. Seraphina's reaction was immediate and predictable. She started posting aggressive, defensive replies to the negative reviews, accusing the customers of lying, of damaging her property, of attempting to extort her. She even threatened to sue them for defamation. "This person is a disgruntled former client who tried to get free services," she would write, blindly lashing out. It was a desperate move, a sign that the negative reviews were starting to bite. This was the escalation I had anticipated. "Don't engage directly with her replies," I advised Liam and the others. "It feeds her narrative. Just state your facts, upload your photos, and let the evidence speak for itself. Her defensiveness only confirms your story to objective readers." The digital ground began to shift. The original Reddit post, fueled by Liam's updates and the sudden influx of similar stories, gained traction. News of the Elegant Gatherings scam started spreading beyond the immediate Reddit community, jumping to local Facebook groups, then to neighborhood forums. People were sharing their own near misses, their own suspicions. Seraphina's 4.8-star rating, once a fortress, began to crumble. Each one-star review was a chisel stroke. Each new victim's story was a hammer blow. The numbers began to fall, 4.5, then 4.2, then below 4, the digital equivalent of a death knell. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about principle, about justice. Seraphina had robbed me of my dream, of my livelihood, of a piece of my soul. Now she was slowly, publicly being stripped of her meticulously crafted facade. The satisfaction was profound, but it was also bittersweet. It brought back the burning sting of my own losses. I remembered the day I had to sell off my industrial mixers, the quiet sorrow of watching my once bustling kitchen empty out. That raw, authentic human emotion, the ache of what could have been, still clung to me. It fueled the quiet fury beneath my meticulously planned actions. "She's offering 50% off all bookings," Liam messaged me one evening, a hint of triumph in his words. "Guess someone's trying to clean up her reputation." He included a screenshot of Seraphina's updated listing, a desperate plea for business. It was a sign of her desperation, a tangible mark of success for our collective efforts. But I knew Seraphina. This was just a desperate gamble, a temporary measure. She would try to weather the storm, then go back to her old ways the moment the spotlight shifted. Her ingrained patterns of deceit were too strong, too deeply etched into her character. My jadedness whispered, "It's not enough. This won't stop her for good." My strategic patience affirmed, "No, it's not enough, but it's the perfect setup." The reviews were a symptom, not the root cause. The root cause was Seraphina herself and the system that allowed her to operate with impunity. The rock bottom for Seraphina's business was approaching, but true justice for me meant more than just a drop in stars. It meant exposing the full depth of her deception. It meant ensuring she could never do this to anyone ever again. The stage was set for the final act, one that would leverage not just the current public outrage, but the quiet, devastating archive of a strategically patient ghost from her past. The air in my apartment felt charged, thick with an almost palpable tension. It had been building for weeks, growing steadily as Seraphina Vance's carefully constructed empire of lies began to crumble. The 50% discount was a frantic flail from a drowning woman. But my jadedness, born from years of watching her evade consequences, knew it wasn't enough. It never was. A discount wouldn't pay back the hard-earned money she'd stolen, the dreams she'd crushed, the small businesses she'd ruined. It wouldn't bring back Imani's flavor. This was not about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about ensuring that the rot she spread was finally, permanently excised. My meticulous nature demanded a definitive end, a reckoning that would leave no doubt about her culpability. My strategic patience, cultivated over years, was finally about to bear fruit. I had watched her online ratings plummet, from a gleaming 4.8 to a pathetic 2.9, then even lower, nearing 2. The sheer volume of negative reviews, all echoing Liam's initial experience, had created a cacophony of condemnation. People were not just complaining, they were organizing, sharing advice, warning others away from elegant gatherings. Seraphina's social media accounts, once curated showcases of celebratory events, became battlegrounds swamped with angry comments and accusations. It was a digital siege, and I, the anonymous informant, the quiet amplifier, had been instrumental in directing the artillery. My transformation from passive observer to active orchestrator had been subtle but profound. The pain of my past, once a crippling burden, had transmuted into a sharp, focused resolve. Every email I sent, every piece of advice I gave, every carefully worded warning I anonymously posted was a step towards this moment. The question now was not if Seraphina would fall, but how far she would fall and how I would ensure that fall was permanent. I spent days, then nights, meticulously organizing my archives. My old laptop, dusted off from a closet, hummed as I extracted decades of digital detritus related to Seraphina Vance. Emails, even deleted ones, resurrected from old backups. Bank statements, both mine and the ones she'd sent me, proving her initial investment deposits were mere shuffles of my own money. Screenshots of her defunct business websites, all promising grand collaborations and failing to deliver. Testimonies from other victims I had quietly contacted over the years, who, like me, had found no recourse and retreated into bitter silence. These were people who had lost investments in fake consulting firms, fraudulent import-export schemes, even a bogus charity. Seraphina's reach was wider than just event spaces. She was a chameleon, adapting her scam to whatever venture promised a quick, easy buck. My living room, usually a calm oasis, became a war room. Documents were spread across the coffee table. My old journals, filled with handwritten notes from the early days of Imani's Flavour and the devastating aftermath, lay open, their pages yellowed with time. I remembered the knot in my stomach as I closed down my catering business, the farewells to my small but loyal staff, the desperate phone calls to lawyers who offered sympathy but no solutions. It was all there, the raw, unfiltered proof of Seraphina Vance's depravity. The weight of that past pain propelled me forward. I wasn't just doing this for myself, I was doing it for every dream she had extinguished. The meticulous planning began. I needed a way to deliver this mountain of evidence, not to Liam or the other victims directly, but to a platform that could truly expose Seraphina and prevent her from ever operating again. The reviews were a good start, creating public awareness, but the systematic fraud needed a more powerful amplifier. I considered law enforcement, but my past experiences with them had been frustrating, fruitless. They dealt in immediate crimes, not intricate, long-standing financial deceptions that crossed state lines and used shell corporations. What I needed was public scrutiny, not just from anonymous users, but from official, credible sources. A local investigative news team came to mind. They had recently run a series on consumer scams in the Richmond area. They were known for their thoroughness, their willingness to dig deep, and their commitment to unmasking perpetrators. This was the perfect channel for my strategically patient reveal, but how to approach them anonymously and ensure they took my claims seriously. A single, poorly delivered email would be dismissed as a disgruntled crank. I needed to present my case with irrefutable professionalism, to show them I was not just another angry customer, but a credible source with an organized, damning dossier. I crafted a multi-part email strategy. The first email, sent from another untraceable account, was short and to the point. Subject: urgent, pattern of fraudulent business practices, Richmond event space. The body: I have extensive verifiable documentation of a prolonged pattern of fraudulent activities by Seraphina Vance, owner of Elegant Gatherings and several prior ventures. This is not an isolated incident. She has swindled multiple individuals and businesses out of significant investments and services for over a decade. I have gathered evidence that links her current scams to her past operations, including specific financial details, shell companies, and the testimonies of past victims. This information is vital for public safety and consumer protection. I can provide evidence of financial fraud, breach of contract, and deliberate misrepresentation. This story connects directly to the recent public outcry against Elegant Gatherings on various online platforms. I will provide a secure, encrypted link for further evidence upon verification of your identity and legitimate intent for investigation. I waited, my heart a drumbeat against my ribs. 24 hours later, a reply came from an official news channel email address. It was cautious, asking for more details, but the tone was intrigued. This was it. My second email contained the link to an encrypted cloud drive I had meticulously organized. It contained a comprehensive digital binder. There were scanned copies of contracts, both legitimate and forged, detailed spreadsheets tracking Seraphina's bank transfers showing how my investment and others had been siphoned off, sworn affidavits from those few brave past victims I'd managed to convince to cooperate, promising anonymity. And crucially, a timeline I had painstakingly constructed, connecting Seraphina Vance's various business names, locations, and reported scams over the years. It was a masterclass in financial deception laid bare. I highlighted the similarities between her previous scams and the current cleaning fee scheme, the vague contracts, the blurry proof, the aggressive counter-accusations. I even included copies of my old business plans for Imani's Flavour, the dream that had been so cruelly taken from me, to provide context for the depth of her betrayal. I used photos of my old kitchen, bustling and vibrant, juxtaposed against the desolate emptiness after she had taken everything. Show, don't tell. I included a final, personal note, still anonymous. I am a former business associate who lost everything to Ms. Vance years ago. I have been collecting this evidence ever since, waiting for her pattern to resurface. The recent public outcry against elegant gatherings is just the tip of a very deep, very destructive iceberg. I believe this information is of significant public interest and requires immediate investigation. I wish to remain anonymous for my own safety and privacy, but I am committed to seeing justice served. My hands trembled as I sent the email. It wasn't fear, but the exhilarating rush of years of suppressed emotion finally finding its outlet. The news team, to their credit, moved quickly. They verified the evidence, seeing the clear pattern of fraud. They didn't just report on the Reddit post, they understood that Seraphina Vance was a serial scammer and Elegant Gatherings was merely her latest iteration. The exposé aired a week later. I sat alone in my apartment, the lights dimmed, watching the local news. The familiar face of the investigative reporter appeared on screen, a serious expression on her face. Then the story began. They detailed the multiple complaints against Elegant Gatherings, showing Liam's initial Reddit post featuring interviews with several of the new victims, their faces obscured for anonymity. Then they dropped the bomb. However, the reporter stated, her voice grave, what our investigation uncovered goes far beyond a dispute over cleaning fees. We received an anonymous tip, a comprehensive dossier detailing a pattern of alleged fraudulent activity by Ms. Seraphina Vance spanning over a decade, impacting numerous small businesses and individuals across the state. They flashed images of my meticulously compiled documents, the old business registrations, the shell company names, snippets of my financial records from Imani's Flavour, juxtaposed with the Elegant Gatherings invoices. They interviewed experts on financial fraud who confirmed the patterns. They even showed a bewildered Seraphina Vance caught off guard by a camera crew outside Elegant Gatherings, attempting to bluster and deny her perfectly coiffed facade, finally cracking under pressure. The public shame was palpable. Her attempts at deflection were pathetic. Justice was served, not just through reviews but through a full, devastating public exposure. The ripple effect was immediate and overwhelming. The local police department announced an active investigation into Seraphina Vance's business practices. The booking platform, pressured by the negative publicity and mounting evidence, suspended Elegant Gatherings and launched its own internal investigation, promising refunds to the affected customers. Lawsuits, both civil and potentially criminal, began to mount against her. The desperate 50% off offer vanished, replaced by a permanently closed sign. Seraphina Vance's reign of deceit was finally, irrevocably over. For me, the aftermath was a strange blend of emotions. There was no triumphant fanfare, no public acknowledgement. I remained Imani Hayes, the quiet woman in Richmond, Virginia. Yet there was a profound sense of peace, a weight lifted from my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The ghost of Imani's Flavour, once a source of bitter pain, could now rest. I hadn't got my business back, no. But I had ensured that the woman who destroyed it could never do the same to another hopeful entrepreneur, another trusting individual. That was my justice. I walked into my kitchen, the one that had been silent for so long. I looked at the old wooden cutting board, dusty but still bearing the faint marks of 1,000 chopped vegetables. A small smile touched my lips. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to bake something for myself. The ultimate twist, one that came to light weeks after Seraphina's downfall, was a quiet, almost poetic vindication of my strategic patience. As the investigations into Seraphina Vance's activities deepened, the police uncovered not just the extent of her local fraud, but her involvement in a much larger interstate network of online scams. My meticulously collected evidence, the years of silent observation, had provided the initial breadcrumbs that led them to this wider criminal enterprise. My personal revenge, born from a collapsed catering dream, had inadvertently ignited a much larger fire, bringing down a network of criminals far beyond the reach of a single Reddit post. Seraphina Vance, the architect of so much pain, was not just ruined. She was utterly undone, a pawn in a larger game she thought she controlled. She had been so focused on her small-time swindles, she never saw the strategically patient ghost, fueled by years of quiet resolve, who would ultimately bring her entire world crashing down. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.